This is one of the cruelest organizations I have ever worked with. You start out with Ellen Goodman, my most favorite columnist of all time, and you finish with an economist who has a PhD. I mean, as my wife loves to say, you know, my husband became an economist because he had neither the personality nor charm to be an accountant. And you're stuck with me for 15 minutes. And I'm going to start out by being the evil twin. And then by the end, I turn into the good twin. But unfortunately, not for another 8 years. So we're going to look at where we are in the economy now. In the little group of 4 that I was involved in, one of the issues that we came up with is this all sounds great, but how are we going to find jobs for those of us who are looking for them in what is the worst economy we've seen since the Great Depression? So with unemployment near 10%, it might appear far-fetched to suggest that we may need Rosie the River. We got to, hold on a second. I want to make sure we got this right. Here we go. Oh my. We are, what did you do to my presentation? You eliminated most of it. You want, good idea. You want me to talk for a briefer time.
You don't have 15 minutes anymore.
I have 4 minutes left. This is what I was going to tell you. The unemployment rate, of course, is about 9.6% now. And if you added those numbers up, we have about 14 to 15 million people who are currently unemployed. These are people who are looking for jobs, actively looking for jobs and can't find them. If you add in the number of people who are actually working part-time but who want full-time jobs if they could find them, and if you add in people who recently were looking for jobs but became so discouraged that they've given up, and once you give up looking for jobs, you're no longer counted by the US government as unemployed, you're out of the labor force, the total number is about 27 million people. It's about 15 to 16%, or 1 out of every 6 workers in the country is now unemployed. So the question is how do you find jobs? There's some good news in that unemployment is starting to get to go down here in Massachusetts. Unlike the rest of the country, we really are very much like the rest of the, unlike the rest of the country. If you saw it on Tuesday night, everything was red, we're blue. But we're also very unlike the rest of the country. For the first time in 3 recessions, our economy, although it feels still very tough, is doing so much better than the rest of the country. We're down to about an 8.4% unemployment rate. It's fallen about 1.2 percentage points since its peak. Nationally, we're at 9.6. It's fallen by 0.4 of 1 point. We're 2.4% of the total American workforce here in Massachusetts, but we've created over 5% of all the new jobs since January. So we're doing better this time, but it's still a rough road ahead. And we're going to have a period of time in which we have some fairly difficult economic times. But the point I want to make is that the demography that we face is going to be all in our favor, right? Us. I'm one of you. I'm going to celebrate a 66th birthday next month. And by the way, my goal, and this is something I've lived by since I was at least 50, is that my goal is to die young, at the oldest age possible. And I think every one of us shares that in this room. We want to stay young way into our old age. So if we can hold on for a little while longer, it's going to turn out that not only are we going to be able to find jobs, everybody in this country is going to be desperate to give us one. So I want to show you why, okay?
Doesn't sound very convincing.
So as the economy recovers, we'll almost begin to see spot shortages. Those are in individual sectors where we're going to need people. And over time, because of the demography I'm about ready to show you, there's going to be a tremendous need for every one of us. In fact, it is going to be our duty to work well into our 90s to save America. Here, let me show you why. This is what the census projects our population will look like in terms of age of adults, 18 and over. I'm going to make it much clearer in a second. But what you'll see here is that if you look at how many millions of people there were in 2008 versus our projection for 2018, this is not my projection. The United States Census Bureau projects this based on recent trends, including immigration and including mortality rates and all that. We're going to actually have fewer 18 to 24-year-olds 10 years in 2018 than we had in 08. Fewer. We're going to have a few more 25 to 34-year-olds. Those are the echo boomers, your kids. I've got a 19-year-old. I just waited long. But there'll be fewer 35 to 44-year-olds, many fewer 45 to 54-year-olds, but there are going to be a lot of us. How many of us? Well, here is what it's going to look like. For those of you who can't see the bottom, I've got 18 to 24-year-olds, 25 to 34-year-olds, 35 to 44-year-olds, and so forth. You'll notice that all the growth is there. In fact, here's the staggering number. Of the 21.7 million additional adults in America by 2018, 8 years from now, they project 21.7 million more adults. All but 900,000 of them will be over the age of 55. And I'll tell you why in a second. And of those, almost 2/3 will be over 65. I'm already there. Some of you are already there. And the reason for that is that you have to think about the kind of the pig and the python moving through. Between 1946, I was born in 44, but between 1946 and 64, the famous baby boom generation, our parents had 20 million more kids than we'd have under normal fertility rates. And if you remember growing up then, I was growing up in Brooklyn, New York, and then Detroit, we converted the entire American economy around children, right? The iconic Disneyland in California, followed by Disney World. Moving to the suburbs, not only because we wanted to have our own house, we wanted a jungle gym in the backyard. The whole idea of summer camps, the whole idea of schools in the suburbs. We converted America. Romper Room, the Mickey Mouse Club, right? We can still sing those songs, right? MIC, right? You know, they're even in tune? Unbelievable. This is dying at the oldest age possible done in music. So we know that. Now that whole generation is moving through. Coming behind it was actually a baby bus generation. That's these red bars. And they are, very interestingly, what labor economists like myself call prime age workers, 35 to 54. There are going to be fewer of them. And the real question is, who's going to do the work, right? And who's going to pay the taxes, right? And that's going to be really important. If we look at it here, you'll see really how staggering that is. There'll be a 44% increase in the number of people between the ages of 65 and 74 by 2018. A 44% increase, a 39% increase in those people 55 to 64, an 8% decrease of 45 to 54-year-olds, and a 4% decline in those people 35 to 44-year-olds. And then we'll get this kind of echo boomers. Those are our kids, because we only had 1 or 2 kids on average rather than 3. But there were a lot of us, so there were a lot of them. But they're just starting to come through. So in the near future, hold on just for a few years, we're going to see that kind of thing. So what does the potential job gap look like? We were asked by Civic Ventures, the Dukakis Center for Urban and Regional Policy at Northeastern, to do a study and ask the question, will there be enough jobs for us? So we went out and we used official data, used the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is part of the U.S. Department of Labor, and we came to the conclusion by 2018 there'll be about 15 million new jobs. And that may sound like a big number to you, but it's really only a growth of about 1% per year, which is about half the rate of job creation during the 1990s. But it gives us 15 million more jobs. But if we take current labor force participation rates, age-specific labor force participation rates, for 18 to 24-year-olds, 25 to 34-year-olds, and so forth, it turns out that unless our labor force participation rates increase, we'll only have 9 million more workers. Okay, 15 million more jobs, 9 million more workers, which leaves us a gap by 2018, right? So the question then is that where will these jobs be? We started looking at what we call the social sector. I'll show you what that means in a second. But it's the kind of jobs we've been talking about here. It's in health, it's in education, it's in nonprofits, it's community organizations, museums, libraries, dance troupes. It turns out that they make up about 32% of current jobs in America, but they make up 47% of the growth in expected new jobs between now and 2018. We're going to grow manufacturing very slowly, construction a little bit. The biggest growth is going to come in all of these kind of service economy jobs and some growth in government as well. So, only if the labor force participation of folks like us increases will there be enough labor supply to meet labor demand. And here's what we're talking about in terms of increasing labor force participation. In 2008, 16 to 24-year-olds had a labor force participation of 58.8%. That is actually expected to decline as even more students go to college rather than finish school at high school or 2 years of college. That is actually going to continue to go down as it's been going down. It's just following a trend. Among those 25 to 34-year-olds, even there's a slight decline, in part because women are still taking some time off when they're having their children, and you're getting men more and more taking paternity leave. 35 to 44-year-olds will go down a little bit, but we project 55 and 64-year-olds to increase their labor force participation rate from about 64.5% to about 68%. 65 to 74-year-olds, people like me, 66 now, going from 25 to 30%, and even people over 75, more than 1 in 10 is expected to be in the labor force by 2018. And if we get that, we'll still have an overall labor force participation rate that is lower than today, and that's not enough to fill the whole labor force gap. We actually have to get those labor force participation rates higher than what the Census Bureau projects. Okay? How do we coax older folks to work? Right? Well, employers are actually, instead of the kind of question we were talking about earlier today, employers, kind of like shying away from us older folks when they've got 27 million people to choose from, they're going to be begging us to work, right? And they're going to have to redesign jobs and restructure jobs so that they meet some of our needs. Some of us are going to want part-time jobs when we're 74, and maybe 2 part-time jobs become a full-time job. Maybe they're going to have more flex time, right? Those are the kinds of things that employers are going to have to start thinking about. If they're not thinking about it today, they're going to lose, right? And we should be telling them that now, because they should think about how they're going to restructure their workforces to do this. We're also going to have to retrain older workers. I mean, one of the things that you often hear is, I'd rather hire, you can't say this out loud because it's against the law, but I'd rather hire the younger person who comes by because they're trainable. Quote unquote, old dogs can't learn new tricks. Well, we all know that's nuts. We not only have more experience, the people I really like to hire in my office are not just wonderful young graduate students who are 24, 25, but my best employee is someone who's just retired after 30 years in government service and is my administrative assistant and has so much experience that I now work for her. Her previous employer was Deval Patrick. Before that was every governor, going back to Mike Dukakis. And I really do work for Terry. But that's the kind of thing we're going to have to see. But we also have to be ready to retrain ourselves, to find new ways that we can do it. I have, for 40 years, starting next year, taught in universities here in Massachusetts. I started at Boston College. I lived in the Highlands, not far from here, Newton Highlands. I taught briefly at UMass Boston to develop PhD programs for them, and now I've been at Northeastern for 11 years. But you know what my passion is, and I've started doing it with the Boys and Girls Club? I want to teach 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds, and I am doing it. I'm teaching statistics to 12-year-olds, right? And I love it. But it takes a different set of skills than I have. Patience, for one.